Thank you. The next question to Congressman Connolly. Taking into account heavy education debts and the lack of entry-level jobs, what would you do to help recently graduated youth enter the workforce?
Well, one of the first things we did do, and again, in opposition to the Ryan budget, was we made sure that student loan rates did not double on July 1. Without legislative action, they would have gone from 3.2 to 6.4%. That's going to allow a lot of students to be able to continue to afford education. The other thing I've supported is the expansion of the Pell Grants. Again, something slashed in the Ryan budget that is going to make millions of American children be able to afford higher education. We have to get this economy growing more robustly so we're creating more jobs, so there is more opportunity. Now, recent data shows finally fewer young people are in fact now living with their parents, meaning they're able to find more jobs and live on independent lives. So we need to accelerate that. We need to build on that. We need to build on the economic foundation President Obama has valiantly worked to build in the face of one of the worst recessions in 80 years.
The next question is addressed to Mr. Durer, who represents Representative Jim Moran. Much has been said about the U.S. military's pivot from Europe to Asia. What are the economic and political implications of that, and how do you ensure that this pivot benefits America?
I think one aspect of the kind of change in focus on that front is to facilitate trade between the Asian region and the U.S. Congressman Moran was a strong supporter of the Korean Free Trade Agreement. He's one of the few Democrats, including Congressman Connolly, that supported it. He's also a strong supporter of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the next major trade bill that's coming up for that region. It's going to be an enormous bill. Tons of revenue can be generated for the U.S. If we can pass it, and the congressman's going to be working really hard over the next couple of years to try to see that to fruition.
And Mr. Murray?
So we can talk about pivots all day long, but what we have to deal with, ladies and gentlemen, is sequestration. And sequestration is a double-edged sword, not only for the economy here in Northern Virginia, and it's amazing to me that these members of Congress, both sides, are letting this happen. We're talking about 123,000 jobs right here in Northern Virginia, and then the other piece of this is our national security. And everyone, Democrat, Republican, in the administration, the Obama administration, and all of our Joint Chiefs tell us that this is a shot in our head for national security. And so I am very concerned about what happens with that, and I see nothing from my opponent, despite the fact that he's the representative of the 8th District where the Pentagon is. There's legislation in existence right now that we could take care of this, and they are holding it hostage to tax increases, and I think that that's a problem.
Thank you. Next question is addressed to 10th District. Mr. Chung, does Congressman Wolf think the U.S. Congress should ratify the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to defer to Mr. Wolf's campaign and Mr. Wolf's congressional office on that one.
All right, thank you. Ms. Cabral, your take on that?
I myself need to look into that issue, quite honestly. So.
I think Mr. Connolly might want to answer that, but you're not allowed to. We have another question for you. In federal tax law, would you support the idea that only earnings made in the United States should be taxed, and that earnings made overseas should not be taxable for U.S. tax purposes?
I don't know that I would adopt a rigid policy, but I am very sympathetic with the idea that many companies face double taxation. If we're going to have an international presence, and we need to, if we're going to treble our exports, and we should, then we're going to have to look at our tax policy so that American companies are competitive and not subject to confiscatory tax policy. So I'm also in favor of looking favorably on repatriation of revenue that's parked overseas with American companies, earned in overseas operations that would be subject to very high taxation if brought back home. And by the way, on law of the seas, it's a good treaty. It ought to be approved. It protects U.S. interests, and it promotes international cooperation. I favor it.
Colonel Patrick Murray, to what extent would you support or oppose extending the Bush-era tax cut?
I'm glad we're getting into some economic issues. Let me just say briefly, I actually agree with Congressman Connolly about what he just mentioned with taxes. We have a territorial system. We're one of the only ones that do. We should move to a global system so we don't double tax our international corporations when they want to repatriate their profits and bring them back and invest them here instead of investing them overseas. And that should be part of a bigger our whole tax system dealing with that. So let me just segue right into the 2001-2003 tax. I actually agree with President Obama, what he said earlier. We should never raise taxes in the middle of a recession, should we? That's what he said. I agree with that. So what we have coming up is what a lot of people call Tax-mageddon. And it's going to be the biggest tax increase in history, right in the middle of a recession, right in the middle of 42. By then it'll be 44 months of over 8% unemployment. I think it's a mistake. A lot of you all are small business owners, and I know you don't support that.
Mr. Duran, representing Congressman Moran.
Sure. Just, I guess, one thing I wanted to add there, we are not in recession right now. Thankfully, a couple of years ago that we pulled out. Economic times are still very difficult, but technically we are not in a recession. The sequestration cuts, I want to touch on that real briefly. It's going to be a major impact on our region if it happens, and I guess I would turn on its head what we heard earlier, why we're in this situation where we're in. And it's because, unfortunately, Republicans are unwilling to put up any new revenues. They're protecting tax breaks for millionaires in order to put the country at a risk of going off the fiscal cliff and the sequestration hitting. And that's just what's occurring. And, it needs to be said. What was the question?
Support of the Bush-era tax cuts.
And Congressman Moran is supportive of allowing the tax cuts to expire. They're the same rates we had in the 1990s with unprecedented economic growth, and so it worked then, and he believes it would work today.
Ms. Cabral, the Affordable Care Act would expand Medicaid services in the U.S. in each state. However, the Supreme Court ruling does allow states to opt out of the expansion. What are your views on Medicaid block grants and the state health exchanges?
I believe it is best for the states not to opt out. I think the Affordable Care Act does exactly what its title says. It makes health care more affordable, it makes the marketplace more competitive by adding more consumers that had otherwise been shut out of this marketplace. So I very much believe that the exchanges are a good thing.
All right. And Mr. Chung, where does Representative Wolf stand on Medicaid block grants and the state health exchanges?
I think, Mr. Wolf believes that, Virginia and Virginians should be able to make those decisions by themselves.
All right, thank you.
Congressman Connolly, would you support legislation that requires school children to report their parents' immigration status?
No, I would not. The United States is not a police state. We're a country that celebrates freedom. The idea that children would report on their parents is something that comes directly out of authoritarian regimes like North Korea.
Thank you.
Mr. Durr, where does Representative Moran stand in regards to what penalties or measures would he support to deter businesses from hiring undocumented immigrants?
Congressman Moran's position on undocumented immigrants, I guess one key tenet of it is he believes that if you break the law, you should be deported. I mean, that should be kind of the standard for, where that kind of comes into effect, because obviously we can't deport all, 14 million, 12 million, whatever it is to date, people that are here undocumented.
But how would you deter businesses?
There's, I guess the one proposal that's been floated out there is to have businesses check people's Social Security numbers when they sign up. I'm not sure what his position on that is, so I don't want to speak to it.
Mr. Murray, how would you deter, what measures or penalties would you support to deter businesses from hiring undocumented immigrants?
Well, I support E-Verify, and I think that's what we should have. It's a system that would work well. It doesn't force private businesses to enforce the law, but it gives them a tool in order to stay within the law. And while I have 30 seconds left, I wonder if the several 20, 30, 40 million Americans who are out of work think that we're not in a recession. There's that old thing about if your neighbor's out of work, it's a recession. If you're out of work, it's a depression. Well, there are a whole lot of people out of work, and the U6 number is about 15%. We are at 8.2%, or wherever we're at now for 42 months, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not getting any better. I wish that it were, but I'm sorry my opponent's not here tonight in person, and we could talk about when he was on the TV the other day talking about the strength of the economy and that we're not broke, despite the fact that we're borrowing 40 cents on every dollar.
Next question to Mr. Chung first. What do you think Congressman Wolf will do to make education more affordable?
I think Mr. Conley touched upon this on the student loan issue, but, obviously, higher education costs are getting out of hand. I mean, I'm speaking on my personal experience. I'm the father of two young children, 4 years old and 2 years old. So, and I know Mr. Wolf cares deeply about this issue because as a father and as a grandfather, he's looking at the future for his family. And so something needs to be done, and Congress and the administration need to get together in a bipartisan fashion on how to make higher education a little bit more affordable for hardworking families, especially in Virginia.
Thank you. Ms. Cabral, your take on that?
Higher education is the key to the American dream, and I myself have lived that by putting myself through college and Harvard Law School with the likes of Pell Grants and low-interest government-backed student loans. And yet my opponent voted for the Ryan budget, which would tear that fabric and make it harder to access those higher education opportunities which are needed to achieve the American dream.
Mr. Conley, the United States has a very complicated relationship with Pakistan, especially in light of its location and its influence near Afghanistan. What is your view of how we should handle U.S.-Pakistani relations?
The United States always must operate from strength, and the United States must always promote its self-interest. The relationship with Pakistan right now is a troubled relationship, but it is not a relationship that can somehow be jettisoned. Both parties, Pakistan and the United States, must work out a workable relationship. Pakistan is now a nuclear power. It is strategically located. It is critical to U.S. interest in the region. And so trying to work out a modus vivendi between Pakistan and the United States is essential for U.S. foreign policy. And so I favor continued engagement, but I also favor a tough love with respect to the Pakistani government to ensure that they're not doing one thing with one hand and another with the other. And I think that's critical moving forward.
Next question to Colonel Patrick Murray. China and India are both rising economic powers. They are seen as both a great new market for U.S. products and service, but also as a competitor for U.S. jobs and its economic lead in the world. How do you envision the trade relationship between the U.S. and China and India in the future?
Well, that is a terrific question, and I can tell you that we have a lot of issues with Chinese trade, frankly, and we need to put us on an even keel with them, because I do believe that we have to look after American interests first, and we have to create jobs here in America. I want to expand our imports, and that's part of our economy, and our economy is failing. And you have a Congress right now that will not work together. It has like an 8% approval rating, and I'd love to know who those 8% of the people are who think Congress is doing a good job. We need to put our country and our people over partisanship. It's not happening. I'm tired of it, and that's why I want to be your representative.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Durr, how does Congressman Moran envision the trade relationship between the U.S. and China and India in the future?
Sure. The congressman is very concerned about the Chinese manipulation of their currency. It's a major problem. It's putting us at a disadvantage with our exports. That being said, both countries are major economic opportunities. For instance, companies like General Motors are selling thousands and thousands of cars over there. That's money coming back to U.S. corporations and tax revenues and creating jobs here for people. So it's that economic interconnectedness also decreases the potential that there would be a military confrontation between the two countries, which is also extremely important for the future of democracy in the U.S. and our national security. So the closer that we can work together and to keep pushing them to make reforms to their economic system that are currently putting us at a disadvantage, the better off we're going to be in the long run.